was going to go in there and just say all we wanted was for Erik, for it to stop, obviously, and then for Erik and I to go to the same school. And that's it. I really felt if I just mentioned it to him that I knew and that it was going to stop, and if I was forceful and I wasn't weak with it, he would have no choice. My brother seemed relieved, although very nervous about me talking to my dad. And it, started to set in for me that this might not go as well as I hope.
Did you feel an obligation to your brother? I mean, why didn't you just say, I'm really sorry, it's too bad, and I'm headed back to Princeton soon, and I hope it works out? Why didn't you say that to him?
And I would never have said that to him, and he would never expect me to say that.
Why?
Just because we were brothers.
Black flies on the windowsill. That we are alone. Winter stole summer's thrill. The river's cracked and cold. See the skies and no man's land. A dark and plume to stay. Hope you need a humble hand. Not a fox found in your place. No man is an island. Oh, yes, I know. But can't you see? Oh, maybe you were the ocean, and I was just a stone.
Here are the four main elements of Lyle's testimony. Number 1, he was his brother's keeper. Number 2, the sexual abuse. Number 3, they had no escape and nowhere to turn. Number 4, he was afraid of his parents and had been his entire life.
Did you feel an obligation to your brother? I mean, why didn't you just say, I'm really sorry, it's too bad, and I'm headed back to Princeton soon, and I hope it works out? Why didn't you say that to him?
And I would never have said that to him, and he would never expect me to say that.
Why?
Just because we were brothers.
Now, let's talk about how much Lyle loved Erik and felt responsible for him, and the way he deliberated Erik's welfare as if he was his own son, not his brother, such as making sure Erik's mental health was stable, making sure he didn't upset or offend him, making sure he calmed down anytime he was hysterical, making sure he had a place to live after the murders, trying to get him into Princeton with him before and after the murders, even confronting his dad about not letting Erik go to Princeton with him.
Kind of like an emotional anguish. I'm almost paralyzed. I stepped outside the house just to think, just to get air, just think, what do I do? Because I can't reach Lyle. Normally, when there was a problem, I would always just call Lyle. Whenever something happened, I would call Lyle and say, this is what's going on, what do we do? Because Lyle was my older brother, and so now Lyle's arrested, and I'm sort of cut off. It really wasn't a thought of running. Lyle had been arrested, and at that point, Lyle was my whole world. He was like he was like a father figure to me at that point. He was far more than an older brother. He was like my idol. So I wanted to get to where Lyle was. I wanted to get back to the United States, and I wanted to be with Lyle, even if that meant being in jail. I did watch the 2020 ABC documentary, and while I knew it was going to be hard to watch, I also knew that Lyle would be on it, and I wanted to see, at least hear his voice. It's the first time I had heard Lyle's voice in 20 years. I haven't been able to see Lyle since September of 1996, when we were separated over 20 years ago. So I really wanted, when I found out he was going to be on the show, I really wanted to hear and see him, and it made me happy to hear his voice. And it brought back a flood of memories that made me happy and made me sad all at once, as I miss Lyle very much.
Lyle had been the one lobbying to be moved closer to his brother in later inmate hearings.
22 years, exactly. So it was just something I wasn't sure was ever going to happen. It was just a remarkable moment for me and really for my whole family.
They're now in the same federal prison.
I wasn't sure how I would react, in 20 years. I just felt a lot of adrenaline, and I ended up bursting into tears. It was just quite an emotional moment, almost unexpectedly. So I think for me, I thought maybe I'd just be numb.
Lyle Menendez is describing the emotional moment he and his brother Erik shared when they saw one another for the first time in 22 years. Their first words?
Just that I love you, and, just the word finally, I think was said a lot.
He takes care of his brother. He just looks out for his brother. It's his biggest concern. And he said, if anything happens to me, I need you to help take care of my brother for me.
And where did you go when you ran out of the den?
I ran to the guest house.
And did your mother follow you?
Yes, she chased after me.
And were you upset?
Yes.
When you got to the guest house, did you call out to your brother?
Yes.
What happened next in the guest house?
Mom came up the stairs right after me, and she said, "Get back." She was still yelling at me. An angry argument between Lyle and Mom.
And what were you doing while this argument was going on between Lyle and Mom?
I was standing behind Lyle.
Is that a position you had taken in the past in that family?
Yes.
Would you stand behind Lyle while he was fighting your battles?
Yeah, I used to stand behind Lyle a lot. That's pretty much my fixed position.
Were there occasions other than this one when your brother was speaking on your behalf and you were standing behind him?
Yes,
Wait for a question, okay?
Sorry.
Do you remember when? When these other occasions
Yes.
were? Okay. And can you tell us?
That happened all of my life.
Did there come a time in your life when Lyle began to intercede on your behalf, particularly with your father?
Yeah, there came a time when Lyle started to intercede for me with all kinds of things. I think it was 8.
Okay.
9.
Okay, so what happened?
He had Lyle go in first and swim, and then after Lyle, he had me. Not after, but right after. Right, I started to swallow in water, and it made me real scared, and I was just pushing with the water, and then I thought of the snapping turtles, and I just panicked.
And what did you do?
I started screaming for help, and Lyle swam back over and grabbed me and lifted me up in the water, and then just took me to shore and said, "It's gonna be all right."
So he was able to get you ashore?
Yes. I began to realize that Lyle was on my side.
Now let's go back then to the tennis court when you're 11 or 12. What happened between yourself and your father that day?
I was on the same side of the court with Lyle, with Dad, and Lyle was on the other side. Finally, he just got too angry with me after telling me enough times to move my feet.
Who's he?
My father.
Okay.
So he just grabbed me and lifted me up onto the fence a few feet off the ground and ripped my shirt. And Lyle came running over, and he wasn't going to interfere with Dad, but he just said, it's okay, calm down, quietly behind Dad. Dad didn't hear me.
He's making this gesture to whom?
To me.
To try to calm you down?
Yeah, I was crying.
And why do you think he was trying to calm you down?
Because he loved me.
You had heard some noises that made you believe that your brother was being molested by your father. Is that right?
Yes. Well, I was hearing the noises for a long period of time, and after a while, I felt that I should talk to my dad about it. One time when he came up to the bedroom, I heard him, and I sort of spent the day thinking about it, and then I went and I told him.
Okay. Why didn't you go up to him immediately?
Well, I just felt that if I decided to talk to him about it, he would probably beat me up, and he would probably get incredibly angry, and he might hurt my brother. I just wasn't sure what was going to happen, and so I thought about doing nothing. I felt like at some point I didn't really have a lot of choice. I should just go talk to my dad, and maybe he would talk to me about it. And I felt like he might, and he did.
He did talk to you about it?
Mm-hmm. I prepared just by sitting in my bedroom, and pretty much the same things I did when the stress level got real high. I put on this little Lionel Richie single I had, just turned the lights out, and I just tried to concentrate. And my dad had taught me to do this, and I tried to just relax because I was just so tense, and I wanted to be relaxed, and at the same time brace myself because I thought he probably would do something to me. My mom wasn't going to do anything about it.
Why didn't you think your mom was going to do anything about it?
Well, at that point, I was 13, and my relationship with my mother was extremely bad, and she was really out of control.
Did you talk to your brother about it afterwards, that you had had this talk with your dad?
Yes.
And did he tell you that things had changed for him?
He never admitted that anything was going on, but he said that he was glad I talked to Dad and that things had gotten better and things had changed. didn't use those exact words, but left me with the impression that it was resolved. And so I was going to stand up to my dad. And like I've been trying to explain, that is a big thing in my family. You just don't, especially on this issue, it's like an enormous issue, but you just didn't stand up to my dad and confront him. Yeah, I mean, I was only 13, so I mean, what could I do really, other than just my own frustration building and anxiety over what was going on in that room, and this sort of need to talk to my dad about it and get it to stop.
Okay, and you're talking about when you were 13.
Right.
Would Erik be asked questions at the table?
Sometimes he would be asked questions. Most of the time he would try to answer a question or something, and my dad would just tell him to shut up. And he was very rough with Erik. Erik just sort of tried to get involved a lot, and that would really upset my dad.
Erik wanted your dad's attention?
He wanted to be part of what was going on.
You mentioned earlier that he used to clown around.
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile your description of him as a sad kid with his clowning around behavior?
I would conclude that the clowning around was to get attention, to show that he was one of the kids, when in fact he had, as far as I could see, no particular buddies in that classroom.
Okay. He didn't appear to have friends that he would talk to or spend time with during class, no particular friends?
No.
Did he seem to be lonely?
He was a very alone kind of person, yes.
I was sitting next to Mamie Van Doren, and they had a couple next to Mamie. And then Lyle, and then Erik, and then the father, and then the mother, and a Canadian couple, and myself.
Okay. Which son was involved in this incident?
Erik.
Erik was sitting next to his father, is that
Yes.
correct?
Mamie Van Doren was talking to the father, and the father was talking to Mamie, and all of a sudden, Erik wanted to say something to Mamie Van Doren, and the father interrupted him and pinched him real hard in the arm and told him to shut up, dummy, I'm talking to you. And the boy just stopped.
What tone of voice did Mr. Menendez use when he said, shut up, dummy?
Very harsh and loud. And the arm.
Okay,
real
you're
hard.
indicating the upper arm area?
Yes, something like that. He turned red and didn't say a word, and put his head down and took the fork and played with food.
And he was very rough with Erik. Erik just sort of tried to get involved a lot, and that would really upset my dad.
Erik wanted your dad's attention?
He wanted to be part of what was going on. And he would just wander into the conversations. He would just wander into the conversations. And sometimes my dad, I remember one time that he was in the black chair and I was by the coffee table and we were doing something and my brother sort of just wandered into the area and my dad just hit him across the face and my brother just went flying into the rug. And his whole face was bruised.
What was wrong with Erik? Did your dad say? Would he say things to Erik? What was wrong with him?
No, they would just tell him to shut up and go away. And why can't you just shut up and go away? And my brother would just stand there. And my dad would have to push him away, or he would hit him. He was being a little too harsh with Erik, who just sat there with. My brother just couldn't respond. Just sat there, sort of stunned, helpless.
Was there a time when you were home and your brother was with you and you thought you heard a burglar?
Yes, with Diane. We were home with Diane and alone. Well, my mother wasn't there. We just heard strange noises. I didn't hear them, actually. Diane heard them and got scared. And she came over and told me, there's these strange noises outside the front door. We went over and we'd hear like a knocking. It's a little soft knock, and then we wouldn't hear anything. And then we'd hear we'd say, "Who is it?" in a stern way to try to get the guy to answer. And he wouldn't answer. My brother was shaking and Diane was petrified, and we didn't know who the person was, and I didn't know where my parents were to call. So I went upstairs and got a rifle. My mom had some rifles. I came downstairs and I stood we had the stairwell and the front door, and Diane and Erik were hiding over here. And I stood and I aimed at the door in case somebody was trying to come in.
Did you think this was fun?
Oh, we were terrified.
Were you scared?
I was scared. And then the door opened, and my dad was laughing hysterically, and he walked in. And he saw me there with the rifle. I didn't shoot him. And he just laughed.
During this period of time, 1986 to 1989, did you speak with your brother regularly on the phone?
Yes.
And was it the same over this period of time, or did it change? Did you always speak to him with the same degree of frequency from 1986 to 1989? Or?
I spoke to him a lot in the fall of '86.
And during the fall of '86, you said you spoke to him a lot. Is that correct?
Right.
Was there any particular reason why you were speaking to him more often then?
Yes.
Why was that?
Because my mother was having problems. He was telling me that he was constantly hysterical at times, crying, very nervous, continually telling me about my mom's sometimes problems with my dad, mostly just her own rages and problems with alcohol. He would tell me bizarre things. One time when he found blood on her sheets in her bedroom, we talked about that and what that could be. Her going through his things. He would just find his bedroom in a way that somebody had gone through it. I felt extremely bad that I was far away and that I couldn't be there. And
why? Why did you feel badly you were far away and couldn't be there?
Because it seemed like he needed me, and we had always been emotionally there for each other, and I seemed far away.
Your father, I think you indicated, treated your brother Erik very differently from you. Is that correct?
Yes, making him feel unimportant. That was over the fact that I was in Princeton, my brother was applying to colleges, and he very badly wanted to be at Princeton with me and apply there. And my dad was, in charge of the applications as usual, and was applying to schools in the East like Brown University and other Ivy Leagues, specifically not allowing him to apply to Princeton so he could not be with me. And I went to my dad and basically told him, this is going to make my brother... I felt like he was sending my brother the message, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough to be at the same school as Lyle, you're not even smart enough to apply there. And I very much wanted him to at least tell Erik he should apply there and try and so on. So I remember having an argument with him about that, and it was a pretty big argument. Well, I was going to go to Princeton, and the condominium that my parents bought was for that purpose, and we were really trying hard to get my brother into Princeton for that fall semester, and my Aunt Marta was arranging things, and everybody was trying to meet with the Princeton people, and well, that was, I wasn't sure if Erik was going to be able to get in. And it turned out that they wouldn't let him in for that semester. And in the event that he didn't get in, I wanted to make an offer on this patio home, because then he was gonna maybe play tennis then at that point and travel. And I wanted a place big enough for, I was gonna be living in Princeton, and big enough for he and his coach, when they came into town, that they could stay in the house with me.
Tuesday night, which would have been the 15th of August. You said you stayed up most of the night?
All night.
And why were you staying awake late at night?
Just couldn't sleep. Because of what had happened with Erik and conversation, just, he was also sleeping there with me.
Did you somehow feel responsible for what had been happening to Erik all that time? What were your feelings about what your brother had told you in terms of your role in it?
I felt that I basically I just felt like didn't seem like there was anything he could do, and I tried to think what I would do if what happened with my dad had continued. I couldn't get out of my mind what had happened between my brother and I, and so in that way I did feel responsible.
Did you ever think, well, maybe he should go to somebody else for help? Maybe he should talk to one of your relatives instead of you, that you weren't the right person to take care of this?
No, I figured I wished he would have come to me a long time before, and I can't imagine he would go to anyone other than me. Just keeping spirits up that things are going to work out with Dad, and he was going to be with me. It looked like it was going to be Princeton at first, and his life was going to change, and that was the main thing we wanted.
What was your behavior?
Extremely upset, very sort of feeling cornered, and this whole thing going on with my brother, and whether he loved me and whether it was a betrayal of trust. And at some point my brother and I got into an argument, and I started shouting at my brother, basically. And I felt, I was having this conversation with Oziel, and at some point I expressed that I felt like my brother had in some way trusted Dr. Oziel more than me, and why did he go to Dr. Oziel and not me first? Because Dr. Oziel had said that Erik was suicidal and had been having a lot of emotional problems and might commit suicide, and that's why he came to him. And I felt like he should have come to me, and I felt hurt just to a large degree, and sort of betrayed by the fact that they had sort of gotten together and talked about things, and I had not had a discussion with my brother.
How was your brother reacting?
He was crying, and he was sort of becoming hysterical, and at some point ran out of the room.
And what did you do when he ran out of the room?
I went to follow him, and I told him that I needed to take care of my brother, and I wanted to just talk to my brother first. And my brother was leaving. He got in his Jeep to leave. And I was trying to get my brother to relax, and I just didn't want to deal with Dr. Xual. I wanted to talk to my brother, and he was sort of hysterical and ready to drive away. He was crying, pretty frantic, upset with me for saying that that going to Dr. Xual had been sort of a betrayal of our trust, and that I believe I said something upstairs about how much could he love me if he trusts Dr. Xual more than his own brother when he's suicidal. So it was pretty intense for him, and I think he was upset, and I should not have said the things I said. You know, a lot of my anger was that I felt like he had gone to Dr. Xual instead of going to me. And it was more that I was sort of hurt by that, and I was feeling like, you know, why did he do that? If he's suicidal, how come I don't know, and how come he didn't, you know, come to me? The whole thing was very upsetting and confusing and frightening.
And he was angry that day, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And he was angry because somebody else knew what you and he had done.
That's part of it, but he was more angry at the break of loyalty. And I'm not sure if it was just pure anger. I think he was quite hurt. Another large part was that he felt a serious break in loyalty, that I would go to someone else, and he felt hurt about that. He liked how close our relationship was.
Showing you what we've marked as 223. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And who is that?
That's me.
Do you recognize some mark on your brother?
The birthmark? The birthmark on his right wrist. It's a large brown birthmark.
232.
That's Erik.
How do you recognize him?
The birthmark on his right hand.
When he would take photographs of you of this nature, would he seem to be directed at taking photos of your faces?
No.
Or would
He would take photographs of your genital area, in the lower half of your body, or you bending over, or just different parts of your positions is what I never really knew.
Because you never saw them afterward, or?
Which yes. He would be focused on those areas, but I didn't see I've never seen these pictures. He would take photographs of us, our private parts.
And would he have you come in and pose for these photographs, or how would that happen?
If we were in the showers or bathtub or changing, he would just use the same camera that my mother used, and then he would come in and take just a photograph or two, and he wouldn't say anything, and then he would leave.
Excuse me. Here, I have some photographs. Were there pornographic films that were made available to you and your brother?
Yes.
And where did these films come from?
My dad brought them home with other videos. My dad we would just watch them together.
With your dad? And what's the earliest age that you remember being shown films like this?
I remember some films in Muncie at the end. Mostly I remember in Pennington House. It was mostly violence, sexual violence. I remember a whole bunch of the films. He showed them to that I remember Peter Goldsmith. He showed them to neighbors in the Pennington house when they would come over at times. He showed them for some of my friends that would come over every once in a while. He'd just throw one on. And
Do you recall a day when you were working at the Menendez home when you came across some printed material in 2 different locations in the home?
Yes.
And would you first tell us what were the 2 different locations where you noticed this printed material?
In the master bedroom, on window seat, and on the floor. It was males. It was pornography.
And it was pornographic what? Magazines, books, what?
Magazines.
Did it show males doing things with other males?
Yes.
What, without getting graphic, what kinds of things?
Having sex.
Okay. Approximately how many of these magazines did you see?
There was a box, and it had stacks about, I'd say, maybe this high.
If you hold your hands up so the judge
about
may see.
this high.
How would this box compare in size to the one that you saw in the master bedroom?
The other was larger.
Larger than this?
Yes, because they had magazines laying flat, and then they had some that were on the side, and maybe a few videos that were in there.
There were videos in the box as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And were all the magazines that you observed in the box of that same sexual nature?
Yes, because I kind of went through a few of them.
Were there also magazines on the window seat?
Yes.
And were they, from what you could observe, also pornographic magazines?
Yes, they were the ones I looked at first.
And all of the magazines that you noticed were male-on-male sex?
Yes.
Now, turning your attention to the materials in the library, were those also magazines of the same type?
Yes.
Do you remember, did that movie stand out in your mind?
Tremendously so.
Do you remember the name of that movie?
Yes, I do.
And can you first say it and then spell it for us?
Yes, Pixote, Pixote.
And you remember that you were shown this film in their home?
Yes, I was.
Did your dad used to have talks with you about sex between men?
Yes.
And what types of situations would he talk to you about?
The bonding between men, going into battle or in competitions, mostly with regards to battle and history, and that sexual interaction and touching. And talking about when I was 6. He had history books with passages outlined in terms of, on this subject, there would be particular passages about Greeks, soldiers having had sex with each other before they went into battle as a way of bonding with each other so they have a stronger connection. The same thing with regards to sports and he and I.
Did he talk about it with regard to fathers and sons?
He talked about it with regard to our relationship as being very special, and our family history with the firstborn and the father. The sons should do what the fathers say, and then they grow up and they become like the father. And someday, me and my son do the same.
And between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
It just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress in my bedroom. Like 2 or 3 times a week.
And for how long did this happen?
Not too long. It began to change close to when I was 7. Just became more involved.
What do you mean more involved?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Want to do this? At some point, did he do some other things to you?
Yes.
What else did he do to you?
He used objects, a toothbrush, and some sort of shaving utensil brush. Well, in the bedroom, we'd have what we called object sessions, and just slide my pants down or take my pants off. Sometimes it would be for a short period of time, sometimes longer. Just lay me on the bed, and he just played with me.
And did he try to anally penetrate you with something else?
He did.
And what was it?
He raped me.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes. I just told him, I don't. I just told him that I didn't want to do this, and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me, and he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it. I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me. She told me to stop it. And that I was exaggerating. And that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
Did you ever tell anybody else? As a child, did you ever tell anybody else what had happened with your dad?
Yes. As a child, no. I was afraid, and my dad didn't want me to. He just said that it was our secret, that bad things would happen to me if I told anybody. And I told him I never would.
How old were you when this stopped?
8.
As I said, there are some things about the molestation by his dad that I have trouble with. I'm not sure that I know everything that there is to know about what happened, but what he told me is essentially credible, and I take what he told me over the course of my time with him to be essentially credible, applying the highest standard that I must in making that assessment. I'm not sure that he gave it all. I think what he gave me was accurate to the extent that any human being can describe that kind of experience accurate. But when you're with someone, you develop hypotheses or areas which, if you had another 60 hours, you might explore. Or if he was a therapeutic client, I would explore with him much more whether the abuse with his dad had gone on longer than he now remembers or longer than he's willing to say. I do have suspicions about maybe it went on longer. That's a suspicion or a tentative hypothesis that I've made. If I were seeing him more time or in a different setting, I would explore with him.
So during the time between 6 and 8, when this was going on, did you tell your brother? Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
Not all victims, but many victims will engage other children, often younger children, in the same things that are happening to them. There are different labels or different ideas about why victims do that. One of the reasons is that it's a way of gaining mastery over the experience. So you do it again but you do it as the doer in the hope that it'll feel different. Some people talk about trauma play or traumatic play. It's acting out with others or in play the traumatic event that you were exposed to. His description of what he was doing to his little brother, both when I talked to him about it and when I saw the videotape of him describing that, were consistent, and those 2 times were consistent. And it was also consistent with how victims have talked about victimizing other people.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods. Whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Erik in the same way. And I'm sorry.
What did that cause you to believe?
That he may have had similar experiences.
When I was a kid, I was told I was molested in front of my father's. We were spending the weekend at a business friend's house. And telling the story, I'm all choked up because I can't believe I've never told anyone the story. And,
no, it's really personal. Yeah.
And then he was in tears. For 20 minutes in speak. I'm telling him this whole story about it. He told me about his father, and I guess maybe one of the reasons we were friends is because we had so much in common experience that we both shared that we'd never spoken to or about to anybody.
So basically he said that his father had been abusing Erik.
Yeah, him and Erik. And
Lyle also.
Yeah, and we take baths and stuff like that. I just, man, you're at this. It's weird because you felt we weren't drinking. We were just sitting there eating, and whole place full of chairs are up on the table. You guys just didn't have to wait for us to leave. And he's telling me this, and I could have fallen out of the back of my seat. He's telling me about him and his brother, and how his brother has been the most affected by it.
After some amount of him crying and having a hard time getting out, he told me that he had been molested by his uncle, or I believe it was his uncle, another adult. I felt very bad for him.
Why?
Because I knew how it felt. I told him,
Did you want to help him?
I couldn't help him. I just wanted to comfort him. He felt that made him lesser and weak, and I wanted to let him know that the same thing had happened. I told him, basically, I don't remember exactly what I told him, but I had let him know that the same thing happened to myself and my brother. I had to go to the bathroom. Came back, and I think he felt better, because he was in tremendous pain. I got the impression he hadn't told anybody this before in his life. He was saying it in a way like he couldn't be like me or something like that, and I wanted him to know that it was okay, and the same thing had happened to me, and that and to my brother.
Why? Why was that comforting that it had happened to him?
I don't know.
Traumatized when they are quite young, say with episodes of sexual molestation, okay?
Yes.
can their brother, relating to that person, his much more recent experiences of violent sexual molestation, trigger some replay or traumatic or fear-inducing feelings in that person whose molestation was farther in the past? Is this a phenomenon that occurs, that hearing about another person's similar traumatization can get you to relive your own?
Yes.
What is learned helplessness? Well, in India, when elephant trainers catch a baby elephant, they tie its legs with a rope to a post. And this baby elephant will struggle for days trying to break free, and it eventually gives up when it learns that it's useless. When it grows up, these trainers keep it tied using the same rope, and even though it's now strong enough to break free and escape, the elephant stands around waiting for the trainers because it's learned that it's meaningless. This elephant has developed what's known as learned helplessness, and this is the fact that despite having the power to change its situation, it's learned to feel helpless instead because of the past. It was identified by a scientist in the 1960s who do the same thing by shocking dogs.
Like you said, everything I knew about my father, you didn't just go to some relative and say, you know, he's doing this with my brother, you know, help me out. Nobody in my family would stand up to my father, and I would not have gone to the police, and I didn't want to run away. But at that time, my life was much, much better than my brother's. And it wasn't that I was like, you know, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I just feel like my life was going very well. And for the first time, my dad and I were having understandings, and I was looking forward to school, and it was just very different. And I didn't want to, and it didn't even occur to me to destroy all that and run away when I felt that I had this option that would work out, which is to talk to my dad and end it. And I also don't agree with you that it would be realistic to just take my brother away and my dad wouldn't go get him. He might have been 18, but in this family, he was the boss, and I don't think my brother could have handled that emotionally.
And where did you go when you ran out of the den?
I ran to the guest house.
And did your mother follow you?
Yes, she chased after me.
And were you upset?
Yes.
When you got to the guest house, did you call out to your brother?
Yes.
What happened next in the guest house?
Mom came up the stairs right after me, and she said, "Get back." She was still yelling at me, an angry argument between Lyle and Mom.
And what were you doing while this argument was going on between Lyle and Mom?
I was standing behind Lyle.
And then my brother and I started talking. Well, as soon as my mom left, he started screaming that Dad was going to kill us. And that Mom knows, and they're going to kill us. And I said, what did Dad say? How do you know that? And I tried to get out of him what had happened. He said something had happened to him in the room. Dad had come upstairs. I guess he had gone up to his room, and Dad had found him in his room or heard him in the room and done something to him. Had started yelling at him about how he had screwed up and betrayed him, and he had told me, and now I was going to ruin him, and that he was never going to let that happen. He was convinced they were going to kill us. He was then wanted to know what I had said to Dad, and basically was very hysterical, accusing me of doing something that we hadn't talked about or something. And I told him that I had threatened him, and that
Was Erik mad at you for what you had done?
he was mad, and he was clearly still hysterical about whatever had happened with his dad not too long before. I was very shaken up by the fact that Dad had done anything to him at all, because I did not expect that. In fact, that was the last thing I could imagine. And I immediately felt like we had to get out of the house. We tried to relax, and went over to the couches like we had before and talked. And I said, we need to get out of the house. He clearly felt they were going to kill us. I believed the same thing. And we just had to get out of the house, and he immediately said that he couldn't, and that would be the craziest thing to do, and that he wasn't going to just run away and let Dad find him and kill him. And
Why was it going to be the craziest thing to do, to run away?
well, that's what he said, and we talked about it, and we talked about a lot of different options. I asked him why he felt that, and he looked at me like I was crazy with Dad's power and who he was and who my mother was, that where were we going to go? And he kept asking me that in a very, how could I think that way? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to hide? And we started to talk about it, and I agreed pretty quickly that there was no place that my parents could not find us. It might be safer to stay in the house and not bring it to a head by running away. If I took off with my brother and we were gone past the evening, he would think I was, that would be he would immediately think I was telling people. I wasn't even going to wait. Well, actually, Erik mentioned relatives on the other coast, and I told him the closest person I was to that I trusted was Aunt Terry, and almost everything that happened in my life over there, my mom found out, and that I was sure it was Terry. But we talked about the police, and that was pretty much dismissed right away.
Why?
We just felt, we could go to the police and explain to them the situation, but what could they do? They might press charges against my dad, and then we would be through for sure. That would be trying to ruin him, and I didn't feel the police could protect us. Mostly we felt that if I went to the police, that they would kill us for sure, and that the police would not be able to protect us. And also, you know, we're in Beverly Hills. My dad was a rich guy and with a lot of power, and there was some concern that, not that they wouldn't believe us, but that they wouldn't do anything.
And on August 20th, 1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid. It's been very frustrating trying to describe what they were like and what it was like and why I felt the way I did that weekend. And I felt frustrated through this whole thing, not being able to express that.
Why would it be necessary for you to pick up cues in the atmosphere or read signals? Why would you want to do that? Why did you want to do that as a child?
Because there was not a lot of normal communication. It was a very unpredictable place, my home, and my mother especially. And, you know, my dad could be violent or even, you know, just I wanted his approval so bad that even just shaking his head sort of made my heart sink. So I was always on edge trying to figure out how I could avoid that.
Were you trying to read the signals this last week?
Yes.
And were you talking to your brother about what various things meant?
Yes.
And did he seem to be engaging in the same process of reading signals?
Yes.
And based on all of the things you learned about your parents in your life, in terms of their behavior, when you saw the things they were doing in that last week, did you believe that they were going to kill you?
We believed that they were.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Now, you said that you saw Jose on the coach with Lyle giving him instructions.
Yes.
Is that right? Do you feel that you have a present memory of Mr. Menendez's instructions of Lyle so as to be able to demonstrate the manner in which he instructed his son?
Yes.
Okay. And could you stand up and demonstrate Mr. Menendez's method of giving instructions?
He was much bigger than me, but he walked very quickly and he always had his head pointed downward. He spoke abruptly and barked. And I remember specifically one of the instructions was to take the ball on the rise, and he would go over and say, "Lyle, give me your racket." He would take his racket, "Take the ball on the rise, let me show you." And then he would force me to feed some tennis balls to him that he would actually hit. "Take the ball on the rise, take the ball on the rise, Lyle. Hit it this way." So it was barking in very quick, short, abrupt instructions.
And what was the father's behavior like in the presence of Lyle Menendez on the field?
Domineering. He was. He spoke with an accent, and the one thing I remember, he would always yell, "Lyle, get the ball, get the ball."
Would that be in an encouraging voice or some other kind of voice?
Not really. At times, it wasn't even conducive to the team because I would like the players to play in position and not to leave their position to go after the ball. And he didn't always understand this, that, I wanted the player in a certain spot on the field, not worried about where the ball was. But he had this repetitive term, Lyle, get the ball, and he would go up and down the sidelines.
What was that interaction like?
Mr. Menendez instructed Lyle the whole hour, shouted commands, told him what to do, how to hit the ball, where to stand. The entire time he spoke.
Did Lyle say anything back?
Lyle was a total robot. Very, very much like a robot would be.
And I also sometimes stuttered because I just couldn't respond because I'd be so tense.
How would he handle that?
To make fun of it, he'd just stutter back. And sometimes he would send me in a room, say, come back when I can talk. Sometimes he would just wait. And I would just keep trying, keep trying to get the words out. And he knew what I wanted to say. He just let me go on.
And how old were you at these times when he was making fun of your stuttering?
Pretty much mostly in Muncie and sometimes in Pennington if I got really nervous. I didn't really have a stuttering problem like my brother did more. I just, in some talks with my dad, I just was like crumbling. I just couldn't get the words out. Couldn't form the sentences.
We were having a family gathering, and Lyle was very restless and hyperactive. He couldn't sit still, so he was kind of running. And Jose shouted at him, "Stop!" And apparently he didn't hear. He didn't stop.
Now, normally when Jose yelled stop, would he stop?
By all means, yes, he would. Jose stood up, grabbed him, and just looked at him, and right in the eyes, and said something to him that I couldn't hear. And Lyle became incontinent at the time. He wetted himself on the floor.
And how did he look when this happened?
He looked pale and trembling. He looked very scared.
You need to understand who my parents are and how strong they are, especially how quick my dad is. And this was a small room, and this was a big gun, and it just flashed through my mind. All kinds of things flashed through my mind.
And on Sunday, how was he as compared to those other times?
He was much worse.
And how did it affect you, if at all, to see your brother, who was less emotional than you, being scared?
It scared the hell out of me. I mean, it almost made me lose it right there, out of control. But them coming into my room a lot. I mean, before almost all the times with the sex, I would say to myself, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to stop it. As soon as he comes into my room, I'm going to fight him. I'm going to jump on him. I imagine myself on a ledge, jumping down on him, all kinds of things to stop the sex. And whenever he came into the room, I just crumbled, and I couldn't do it. No, I knew I couldn't. Not when he was right in front of me.
You recall testifying here that when your father would get angry with your brother would get timid?
Yes.
Do you recall hearing the testimony of various coaches that when your father would be on the attack verbally with your brother would go frozen?
Yes.
Did you physically resist?
No.
Did you think you could?
No.
Why?
Because this was my dad. This was a big guy, and I don't know what it was. I mean, it was just my dad, and it was just something about it. I couldn't. I mean, I remember in the sex that when he would come into the room, I would want to say, no, I don't want to do this, and I would want to say, I don't want you to touch me, and I would want to say these things, but I would just see him. He was like huge, and he did what he wanted to me, and I couldn't stop that. And I wanted to, but I couldn't. I don't know why. My dad was pounding on the door for me to open it up, and I did. I unlocked the lock, and I just went back to the corner of my room.
Was he simply pounding, or was he yelling and screaming to open up the door?
No, he was telling me to open up the door.
How was he doing that?
He was saying, open up the door, open the goddamn door.
Was he mad?
Yes, he sounded very mad.
Now, you indicated your dad is a big, strong man, correct?
He is.
Did you think that door was going to come crashing in on you?
I don't remember exactly what I was thinking. I was just afraid to open it up.
How long had he been yelling and screaming for you to open the door and pounding on your door? How long had that been going on?
10 seconds.
So you opened it up pretty quick.
Yeah, I wasn't going to wait long. You didn't say no to my dad. Whenever my dad came into my room and started yelling or did something like that, I froze up, and I wasn't able to refuse him very easily. I didn't know what my parents were doing in the den, but I thought they were coming out. I did think they were coming out at any second, and I had got it done this as fast as possible. I met my brother at the top of the stairs, and I told him, I can't go in my room tonight. I'm not letting him go in my room tonight. And at that point, I said, I got to get to the car. And that's when I ran to the car immediately. It didn't happen this, and this. It happened, boom. I was thinking they were coming out of that room, and they were going to come any second. And I kept on having this vision when I was in the closet getting my gun, that if I ran down the stairs, my dad was going to be at the foyer because he was about to come up to my room. And I was thinking, and it flashed through my mind, I can barricade myself in my room, and then I realized I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to confront him like that, and I just ran down to my car. I was thinking about getting to that room before they left the room, because if I met them in the foyer, I thought I was going to die. I knew I had to get to that room before they even exited that door. That was the main thing going in my mind. Hurry, I got to get to that room.
You have to understand, Kitty Menendez was severely mentally ill their entire lives. That alone is terrifying. Having to grow up in the custody of a mother who is unstable and volatile and mercurial is beyond petrifying for a child. Now add in her sick, unquestionable loyalty to Jose, no matter how much he beat her and the kids, and how she helped to facilitate the sexual abuse by covering it up, and how she knew about it all along but never stopped it, plus her often being violent and out of control, unprovoked and on the random, threatening to poison the entire family, leaving suicide letters around for Erik to find, which proved she was irrational and a threat to everything around her long before the murders, driving like a maniac wherever they went, whether she was late or not, taking Erik with her to buy a rifle with the only explanation that she was going to kill someone, stalking the dad's mistress to New York and taking pics of her, tapping the boys' phones, her extreme substance abuse with alcohol and over a dozen different prescription pills to the point where she OD'd and had to be hospitalized. With all things considered, you'd have to be a complete idiot not to understand how and why the boys were afraid of her their entire lives up until the point of the murders. They knew their entire lives, no matter what went down and no matter how badly the father abused the boys and Kitty herself, that she always expressed vicious, unmitigated hatred and loathing towards them, and that her loyalty was only to the father, which is why they were convinced she was in on the plot to kill them that night. She had told them she hated them their entire lives, and that she would poison the entire family one day, so it's not implausible for them to have feared her as much as they did Jose. She was not an innocent bystander who would have helped them in any regard. She never did. She was a deranged, homicidal, neglectful, child molester mother who had explicitly threatened their lives on multiple occasions.
Why did you say that Mrs. Menendez was even more confrontational than Mr. Menendez?
She could be fierce, she could be rigid in her thinking, stubborn, and you knew also that, you know, your job could be put at stake. They were intimidating people. They intimidated all of us.
All of us meaning the teachers?
Teachers, administrators, neighbors.
Did you see her yelling at her son Lyle?
Yes.
And was this on more than one occasion?
Yes. The way it worked is that we traveled through the breakfast room a lot, to and from the house where we'd have breakfast and the tennis court. So as she saw Lyle come in from the guest house and travel back and forth, each time she saw him, the confrontation tended to get to be a little bit more abrasive each time.
During these confrontations, did she appear and express anger at him?
Yes. She would get more angry.
Now, was there a physical posture that you observed that she would frequently assume when she was angry this way?
Yes.
And could you show us what it was?
After a while, she'd kind of work up, in her, she'd kind of give me one of these, oh, my son, So it was like that. It was kind of a fist clenching thing.
You smile and you laugh when you describe this. Was it funny at the time?
Yes and no. It got kind of repetitive, so it got
So you
kind
didn't
of silly.
take it seriously?
I didn't think Lyle was in danger for his life. No.
Okay, but this was a behavior you saw over and over and over again?
Yes.
Were you there when Lyle was 5 or 6 and she did it?
No.
You've heard people describe your mother when she was irrational and out of control, have you not?
Mm-hmm.
And they describe this grimace and the fists and that whole thing.
Yeah, she used to clench her fists and her whole face would turn red.
You've seen it. And you saw it over the course of your life?
Yeah.
Did you have some perception that your mother had some kind of knowledge about you?
Yes. Just that she had this power, it seemed, this magic thing, that she always knew whatever I was doing or wherever I was going and pretty much everything about me that I didn't understand.
Were there things that your mother seemed to know that were not in your diaries?
Yes.
Did you have any idea how it was that she knew these things that you weren't telling her?
No, I had no idea. It was really strange to me.
Did it make her seem strange to you?
Yeah, well, a lot of things made her seem strange to me, but this, all that she knew, was really weird. It was different.
Had there also been discussion about your mother poisoning the family?
Well, there hadn't been too much discussion about it, but that's what she had said.
She said that?
Yeah.
Did your father ever tell you that she was likely to do that or might do that?
Yes, sort of. I had a lot of fear about my mother.
Well, let's talk first about the poisoning thing. Were you afraid of her because of that?
Partly.
Were you afraid of her because she seemed to have magical knowledge?
Partly.
And were there other reasons why you were afraid of her?
Yes. She was real moody and she would change from one mood to another. She would be in a normal state and then she would just start yelling and throwing her arms around and throwing things and then she would switch back to her other mood.
So, did you know what... I'm sorry, go ahead.
She would disappear a lot. I didn't know where she was going.
Why did that make you afraid?
Because she was unpredictable.